Is your job on the line or the person next to you? Are you in for a salary cut? These are just some of the harsh realities that are starting to creep in for the 16.4 million employed South Africans. Good evening, I'm Aldrin Simpier and this is Unfiltered. But first, here are some of today's top stories. Thousands have already applied for the special unemployment grant. It turns out that the large number of the applicants don't qualify as they are already recipients of other social grants.
I'd also like to request all those who have received the food parcels to please be considerate and not take more than your share. We are struggling. People are struggling. There is nothing as painful as people who become selfish.
Pressure is mounting on the president to reopen the economy. The Democratic Alliance is calling for the lockdown to end, but labor unions say reopening the economy must be done thoughtfully to protect workers. Labour Federation SAFTU says the government needs a different approach to help rebuild industries.
COVID-19 has brought about a total destruction of our economy. Our economy, as we speak now, is under a great deal of stress and challenge.
And the bail application of 7 people charged with the murder and kidnapping of 16-year-old Andile Mbutu from Otongati in KZN will be heard next week. The 7, including a minor, were nabbed after Mbutu was seen in a video that went viral, badly injured and lying in a pool of blood after being allegedly beaten.
We need no bail for them. They mustn't get in even. We want them to be life sentenced.
Well, more on those and other stories at 9 o'clock with Chantel Yankees on the SABC News Bulletin that is here right here on SABC3. Back to this evening's discussion. Is South Africa geared up for the COVID-19 economic slump with the bloodbath lurking? We want to know from you, what do you think should be done to save jobs? Please join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter using the hashtag SABC News Unfiltered. Tonight we speak to those whose pockets have already taken a knock, then Statistician General Risenga Maluleka, the Department of Employment and Labour, as well as Labour Federation, COSATU and NUMSA for this particular discussion. But right now, let's speak to those who are directly impacted by COVID-19. We start off our conversation speaking to Bremer Logistics, small medium enterprises CEO with branches in Johannesburg and in Cape Town, Durban, as well as Port Elizabeth, Polokwane and Bloemfontein. They've been forced to let go of at least 40 of their employees. Tepo Mwikwa is the CEO of Bremer Logistics and he talks to us now about the impact that his company has suffered. Good evening, Tepo, and welcome to Unfiltered. Just a full overview of what this impact has been for your company.
Evening, Aldrin, and thanks for having me. Well, in a nutshell, we just prior to lockdown, we were just a company, facing an enjoyable growth. We as you alluded, we've got about 6 branches, and just prior to the lockdown, as we were supposed to be moving into a new warehouse, just on the 1st of May, and the builder couldn't finish on time. He had to vacate the stand. And with the lockdown, prior to lockdown, actually about just 2 days to 3 days before the lockdown, we had to prep to close the company. And ourselves, during the lockdown, level 5, we had to start to get to understand what what does this lockdown mean to us? What does level 5 mean to us? What is the government trying to do? Well, we got to understand the government was trying to slow down the spread of the virus itself and obviously prep itself to stock up its own COVID. Without any budget, faced with this lockdown during level 5, we had to, implement other measures in terms of, because during level 5, we only could run on 20% capacity.
Yeah.
Meaning we were sitting with a surplus capacity of about 80. I mean, we've got branches nationally. We've got fixed costs in the form of warehouses, salary bill, and many other fixed costs. So we had to cut those costs down. We had to let go of about 40 people, which was the hardest thing that we've ever done as a company.
So letting go of 40 people, that is at least for now, and this is just the start of the impact of COVID-19 on your business. Do you foresee that you may have to let go of more employees and also might even be forced to close shop?
You know, we're not going to rule out that. I mean, I keep a close eye on the numbers of the infection and obviously the death rate, and it's worrying. But the COVID, as you said, it gives us an opportunity to prep and make sure that as a company, you know, we prioritize the health and safety of our staff. We top up on our PPEs. It all depends. We in level 4. Level 4 gave us at least a 40% notch. It took us to about 60% capacity. We want to get to level 3, whereby we'll notch another 20%. We'll sort of move to 80%. In that level, we are safe. Remember, the staff that we laid off, we did not retrench them. We laid them off for a short while, depending on how quickly we get into level 3, so that we can bring them back. So I don't foresee that now.
Yeah.
We are still optimistic and positive that we can still, turn around. Yes, our staff members made a great deal of sacrifices in the form of salary cuts. I mean, our staff members took about 50%. I took about a 65%, just to make sure that we stay afloat.
Yeah. Okay, just quickly hold on the line for me, Tsepo. While we move over to this, let's just quickly talk to one of the people who have been affected by the uncertainty of jobs and security during this particular time. We're now going to speak to Azana Boy. Azana, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. You've received a Section 189 saying that you will be losing your job. How do you feel right now?
Good evening, guys, and thank you for having me. Remember, we received the notice for Section 189 exactly on the same day that the President imposed a lockdown in the country. So the confusion, the panic.
Yes, go ahead,
confusion, the panic, and obviously the uncertainty of you don't know what is happening. We are currently still in lockdown, obviously, and we are still waiting to confirm the dates for the CCMA to start the consultation process.
Yeah.
So everybody is obviously now going into the anxiety. You don't know what's happening. You don't know what will happen through the consultation. It's really a very scary period.
And what are those anxieties like? What are some of the things that are at top of your mind at the moment with this, some would say probably certainty for some that they will be losing your jobs? What is going through your mind?
The company has made it very clear that they are looking at least at an average of 200 people. So basically, the majority of us, which is the lower level earners in the company, we are very anxious. You are thinking of everything that could go wrong or against you in that manner. You don't know. It would be easy. Us up middle age. It would be easy if we were talking 10 years back in the country, 10, 15 years back in the country, where it was easy to just hop, you just go into the next company. But that opportunity is no longer there. What happens now? What happens tomorrow? Because you're looking at in the line or industry that you're in, and most companies are just simply doing the same thing that your company is doing. So there is no positive outlook. You don't have anything positive to look forward to.
And for
it's
your
a very, very scary anxiety.
Yeah, and Azana, for you and your family, have you guys started having this conversation that it may just mean that with some of your assets that you may have to scale down?
I'm going to be very honest with you. I have not even told my family that is the situation. I'm based in Cape Town, and all of my family is in East London. So I've actually tried to block it off and trying to be, I don't know, you just try to block it off and hope for the best. I have not, honestly. But we do speak with my colleagues. Obviously, everybody is anxious. It's the bond payments, people driving. My current status is the fact that I'm worried about the rentals. How am I going to survive?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just quickly bring in Tsepo into the conversation before we conclude. Tsepo, of course, you speaking from a point of view as an employer, but just listening into what Azana is saying, and she probably speaks the language that some of the people that you've had to tell that unfortunately we'll have to let you go. What is going through your mind as an entrepreneur?
You know, I've always been a person who who likes to create employment. I think when I had to sign off the layoff letter, one of the hardest thing. And these numbers that we're talking, 40, these are not 40. These are not just numbers. These are people. I mean, you take 40, you multiply by an average of 3. This is 120 people that are being fed by our company. It pains me, the situation that we are in. And hence I said to you that I'm quite positive. We've got to stand up. You know, our goal right now, short-term goal, right? This year is not about making money. It's not about, it's about survival. It's no longer about the turnover that we're looking at this. It's about ensuring that we get to level 4. And yes, for the government to do a wholesale easing, it's quite dangerous. We'd like to get to level 2 so that we can bring our 40 staff that we laid off.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that, Tsepo Mukwade, who is joining us from one of his companies that are now also laying off workers, 40 as is indicated. Azana Boy, who is with Comair, and Comair has indicated that they've taken a knock and they've filed for voluntary business rescue. And the point that Tsepo makes right there towards the end is very important, because once you speak about one person losing a job, it's not just about how that impacts him or her, but it's also how it impacts his family and the extended family that they have to take care of. That conversation we'll have with the Statistician General, Risenga Maluleka, just after this break.
We're going to be facing a huge problem of unemployment. We now need to massify whatever we do. And in a way, COVID-19 gives us an opportunity for a new beginning that is going to make us have a new way of doing things, new sectors of our economy, new ways of functioning. And it should enhance a number of things that we need to do as a country going forward.
And with that said, let's now welcome the Statistician General, Risenga Maluleka, into this conversation. SG, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. It is a difficult period, and just listening into what the President had to say there, and we've heard from the Minister of Finance as well, saying that we need to start rethinking the economy and how we understand the post-COVID economy.
Aldrin, it is difficult indeed, but you would expect the Statistician General not to have taste buds of difficult or non-difficult times when it comes to measurement.
Sure, and what does that mean?
The fact is that the Statistician General must always measure objectively whether matters are difficult or not, and must report to the public of South Africa at all times, and independently so.
Sure. Listening into the conversation that we had earlier on with Tsepo Mukwade, who's the CEO of Prima Logistics, he indicates quite clearly so that the loss of a job of one person does not only have an impact on that particular person. And if we look at the Stats SA and some of the data that has come out from Stats SA, we also see the impact that the ripple effect of an economy going through a slump and the job losses, the impact that it has even on the extended families as well.
True, yes, no doubt, Aldrin. We need to appreciate that human life has equal worth. Whether you are working or not, it doesn't matter. You must always be catered for in the public space, whether it's jobs or it's a life or it's anything. So human life has equal worth. Let us start there.
Yeah.
The second issue then comes that a loss of one job, whether it's one job or many, does affect a life. And indeed, numbers are about humans. And even if you can be as objective, it does affect a person's at the end of the day. So the numbers that we churn out from Stats SA or any statistical agency across the world have to do with human beings, even if we put aggregates on them.
Yeah. Let's then just quickly touch on the labor survey that you conducted, that you started to conducting today. Very different to what we used to. What are some of the questions that you've asked, and how efficient was it today compared to what you used to?
Firstly, let us admit that we are used, as Stats SA, to go to the households and talk to members of the public and engage them person to person. But COVID-19 has changed the world. Life will never be the same. Cultures will never be the same. And even the status quo that used to exist will not exist in the future. And for that basis, even for us as statisticians, we have to go out to learn to collect data using technology, which we were testing over time. But what we need to do is we need to have our field workers calling on the members of the communities, the households that we visited. We have been collecting their contact numbers. So these are contact numbers that we'll be using. We do rotate our members of the public from time to time when we are collecting. But this time we are not going to be able to rotate them because we have reliability in the second quarter that we have collected.
And
now,
that,
having said so,
yeah. How soon would you be able to reconcile these figures and be able to release them?
There are two things that we are doing. We already have released data on behavioral patterns of members of the society in relation to COVID-19. We will be releasing the quarterly labor force survey at the end of June or after the end of June. However, we are collecting an online survey that should respond to COVID-19 as urgent as possible.
Okay, SG, let's touch on that just after this, and also looking into the number of businesses, 4 out of 10 businesses, saying that they fear that they won't be able to survive COVID-19. Just after this. And welcome back. You're still watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Simpier. And the focus this evening is on the blood job losses that we are expecting. We've heard from Treasury saying that they're expecting that at least 7 million people, in the worst case scenario, would be losing their jobs. We're in conversation this evening with the Statistician General, who will be joining us, and we also will be speaking to the DG of Labour, Mr. Lamati, about the impact that this will have on the jobs. SG, let's just quickly touch on the rapid survey that you did, which indicated that around 4 out of 10 businesses are saying that they won't be able to survive this.
Indeed, we did what we call a convenience survey, where we went to businesses and we asked them to tell us the effects of COVID-19 on their businesses. Other than the 4 out of 10 businesses that indicated that they will not be able to survive, we also noted out of the survey that 85% of the businesses indicated that they are not able to meet their turnover, their regular turnover. And about 54% said that they will not survive beyond 1 to 3 months if the COVID-19 lockdown, as well as the COVID environment persists, because it requires spacing, human spacing, social spacing, as well as issues of working with limited staff members. So indeed, there are challenges out there in the businesses. COVID-19 is causing a lot of challenges in all aspects of societal life.
Yeah. Let's just quickly bring in the DG for Employment as well as Labour. Mr. Lamati, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. Listening into what the Secretary General, what the Statistician General had to say there about how businesses are responding, 4 out of 10 saying that they won't be able to survive, and 54% of the respondents indicating that they can't survive without a turnover between 1 to 3 months. Do those numbers scare you at all?
They do, Eldrin. Good evening, SG as well. They do, and SG spoke about, he made this quote that human life has equal worth. We deal with people on a daily basis. We see a number of UIF applications that we are receiving on a daily basis. And we know what it means, that once you lose a job, you're going to be at home, and you're going to be without an income. And you earlier on mentioned that if one person loses a job, it's not only that person, it's also 8 other people who are dependents of that person. So it scares us quite a lot, because we are experiencing a situation where, I mean, even before lockdown, we were talking about this job bloodbath. It's going to be worse now, because as SG has indicated, that companies are just finding it very difficult to cope.
Yeah. And from the figures that you have looked at, if at all, what are the numbers telling you?
I mean, we use the same numbers that you quoted, that National Treasury is saying just about 3 to 7 million people are probably going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Now, it's a very scary thought. It's a very scary thing to even look at. Yeah. One hopes that as we ease the lockdown and the economic activities resume, and there are less restriction to companies, we'll be able to avert this.
Yeah, and let's continue that conversation just after this break. But just quickly bringing in the Statistician General again, I know that you said that you need to be a bit careful, SG, when it comes to pronouncing on issues like these. But is it possible at all for us to reimagine an economy or restructured economy?
Well, that space belongs to policymakers. What we do as statisticians is to make those numbers available to policymakers. We make them available to government, as you understand that we are independent in our practice. But not only that, members of the public and business leaders must also receive the same figures that we are releasing. To do so will mean that there will be engagement amongst members of the society in understanding what needs to be done. But I must admit, government is really actively using our numbers at this point in time. So are leaders of captains of industry.
Thank you so much for that. That is the Statistician General of Stats SA, Risenga Maluleka. When we come back, we continue our conversation looking at the workforce with the DG of Labour, but we'll also be introducing the voices of Labour. Kosatu and Numsa will be joining us just after this. Goodbye to our SABC 3 viewers, but the discussion continues on the SABC News Channel 404.
You can't sit with millions of unemployed South Africans, and in certain industries, you just allow the non-South Africans to be employed without any regulation. We must introduce those quotas and stick to those quotas and be very hard to those quotas.
Well, the Minister of Employment and Labour there, Thulas Nxesi, when we come back, we'll start that conversation as well with the DG around what the thinking is behind this idea to limit the number of people who are employed in certain industries, especially those who are foreign nationals. But just let's quickly look at some of the tweets that you've sent through. A tweet here from God Bless South Africa, who says that very soon thousands of South Africans will be blacklisted for failing to pay. By the way, I've already received an email of demand. And Tlantla says this pandemic has presented an opportunity for the government to reconfigure the economy. Businesses will not have capital to get back to business and will rely on government to provide a stimulus. Government As an issuer of currency can do that, our debt to GDP is still low and inflation is still in check. And the judge says other business owners don't care about us, the workers. What matters to them is profit. God will judge them one day for their greediness. We can save the world if we want. I know we can make it only if we stop being so power hungry. Wealth is nothing before God. Let me sit down. Well, I don't know how many other people will be able to sit down knowing very well that they have a situation where they're having this particular debate around how do you make sure that you survive COVID-19? On the one end, you have a salary cut, for instance. On the other end, you're dealing with an issue around all the other financial responsibilities that you have. Let me just quickly bring in the DG again. DG, good evening again. The question and the issue that was raised now in the clip by the minister around the number of foreign nationals, documented foreign nationals in certain industries, that there should be a cap. What is the thinking behind that? Hi, DG, can you hear me? DG, can you hear me? Okay, in a moment we'll try to get back to the DG about that particular conversation, and that's been an ongoing debate in terms of companies hiring foreign nationals, and we've seen, for instance, in the trucking industry along the N3 route. Remember last year, the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula, was kept busy trying to find a solution to the impasse that took place there, where these trucking companies and logistic companies were accused of hiring foreign nationals instead of hiring South Africans. The DG is back on the line with us. DG, the clip that we played earlier on, listening to what the Minister had to say about trying to curb or have a cap on the number of foreign nationals who are employed in certain industries.
Hi, Aldrin. The minister said we are dealing with something that is that has to do with the labor migration. Now we all know that throughout the world, countries deal with labor migration issues differently. In other countries, they would have a minister of employment and labor, setting aside sectors that will be only, only nationals would work in those sectors, and others set quotas, says only. Now, in South Africa, we are not different. So what we're saying is that part of the employment policy that we have to develop, its element is labor migration, and we must therefore empower the minister to look at different sectors. And say in this sector, because we have skills in the country, we will only take South Africans in this country, or a certain number of. Already in the Immigration Act, you have a provision. If you are an investor, if you're coming to invest in South Africa, there's a provision in the Immigration Act that allows 60% of South Africans and 40% of. But the proviso there is that there must be transfer skills, which is not part of this. So you have sectors where you don't really need to import skills, like the hospitality industry and all. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about. But there's preference by the employers of foreigners over South Africans, which we find it very difficult.
Okay, we'll touch on the industries that you would say that have been worse affected, but what some players in the industries as well as human rights organizations, are saying that this smacks of xenophobia from the South African government.
Well, that's. I mean, we look at things differently. From a policy point of view, we're saying if we don't address this thing, it's actually going to exacerbate the incidences of xenophobia and violence. I mean, you've seen what happened in the tracking, in the flight transport and flight area, where trucks were being banned, and the reason for that is that employers in that sector were employing foreigners, and in some instances, foreigners who didn't have illegal papers, and even in some instances didn't have driver's license. So those are the things that we're trying to stop and make sure that whoever works in the country is supposed to be working and is provided for by the policy and is in the sector, and that person provides the skill that is needed by the economy.
In the example that you make of the freight industry, is it not true that actually this is a failure from the labor inspectors, because it is the labor inspectors who should have picked this up?
No, not true. Not really. You understand that the responsibility of the Department of Labor is not to enforce immigration regulations. It's Home Affairs. But secondly, even Home Affairs, you can't entirely blame them, because employers know that there are policies in the country. They know that they must not employ people who come into the country legally. So why are they doing that? And also there's a role that must be played by police here, because banning of trucks, it's illegal and it's crime. So they should come in and deal with that. Yeah.
I have a bit of a difficulty with what you're saying now. What then is the job of a labor inspector if a labor inspector cannot go into a company and pick up that in this particular company there are people who are hired who don't have the necessary documentation?
No, that's not the job of a labor inspector. The job of a labor inspector is to make sure that whoever is employed, whether legally or not,
or illegally,
enjoys the same, even illegally, enjoys the same legal rights. What we do, once we pick up that there are people who are legally employed, we call it the immigration officials, because we don't have the legal right to take them or to remove them from the premises.
Do you know whether the inspectors have been doing that? Because that is why I'm saying that the work of the labor inspector, if a labor inspector walks into a company, picks up that there are foreign nationals who are employed in this company who don't have the necessary document, does the labor inspector then tell the Home Affairs Department that here are the issues that we have picked up? Does the labor inspector then come back to check whether these things have been adhered to?
No, sure we do. We conduct joint inspections with immigration officials.
Yeah. Okay, DG, let's. Sorry, you were saying?
No, I'm saying we do that. We go back and check whether those guys who have been removed by immigration officials,
but they still find
are not back there.
But they still find employment. That's why the trucks get burned.
Well, who do you blame? Because we don't employ them.
Does the company then continue to operate even though the company is breaking the laws of the country?
Now, you see, what we must do then is that we must also bring in the Department of Trade and Industry in the picture, because they are given the license to trade, right? Mm-hmm. So so it becomes not only the Department of Labor, Immigration, or Home Affairs, then the Department of Trade and Industry must come into the picture.
The sense that I'm getting, DG, is there is some sort of a disconnect between the various governments that are supposed to be speaking to each other and try to make sure that everyone adheres to the rules and regulations of this particular country. But let's continue the conversation just after this. We will be joined by Union Federation COSATU as well as NUMSA.
There are certain districts and areas where there are no infections and can go even down to a level 1. We also say that all businesses must be permitted to do business, but they have to comply to strict rules when it comes to hygiene to ensure that we prevent the further spreading of the virus.
The challenges and the magnitude of the problems which have beset the economy and South Africans in particular. However, that does not mean that we need to sacrifice the lives of South Africans at the altar of economic expediency.
For the past few days, we've seen an increase of more than 200. In actual fact, the 663 confirmed yesterday was the highest ever recorded number in the country. This is really concerning, and we call upon government to strengthen and tighten the rules and regulations of the lockdown. We reiterate our call that it was premature for government to reduce or loosen the regulations.
We are not going to call for the suspension of the lockdown. We still support President Cyril Ramaphosa, and we are calling on all those who are saying that the lockdown must be suspended to change their minds.
Welcome back. We continue our focus on the expected job bloodbath. As we've indicated, the Treasury is saying that in the worst case scenario, 7 million employed South Africans will lose their jobs. Right now, we'll be joined by Begin Jali, who is from COSATU. We'll also have Pagamile Hlubi-Majola from NUMSA. Mr. Jali, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Starting off with what COSATU has picked up, some companies using this particular period to get rid of their employees.
Yeah, no, indeed. We remember now we're on the lockdown. We're not able to follow all the companies because of the lack of movement. But from the statistics that we're getting it from the UIF, which we meet with them on a daily basis, there's been an indication that some of the application received a normal UIF application, meaning a termination of employment. They said that they're increasing from the normal one, beside the one for the COVID-19 application, the temporary one. So clearly indicating that there are employers who are silently retrenching workers when they are not even in the workplace. Yeah. So it's a worrying factor in that way, because in that circumstances, they will not even be able to get the benefit of the retrenchment packages that employers are supposed to pay workers when they terminate employment.
Pagamile Hlubi-Majola, from your end as NUMSA, is this a similar experience that you guys have picked up?
Yes, indeed. Our members are under extreme pressure. This is really a very difficult time for the working class and their families. The COVID-19 lockdown has basically meant that there's several challenges that workers are facing. Many of them are facing the threat of job losses, where companies have served unions with Section 189 notices. We've experienced that from several companies, ComAir being one of the more recent ones. Euroware, for example, Daulikwa Mine, just before the lockdown, issued a Section 189 notice saying that it would retrench at least 6,000 workers. So we've had several of these types of incidences coming through to our offices. But this situation has also been exacerbated by this temporary employment relief scheme, this relief fund that UIF is supposed to pay out. We've had some serious challenges around that, and I'm actually glad that you've got somebody from the department. Hopefully they can give some explanation about what's been happening, because the payment of that relief scheme has, in some sections of the working class and some companies, created quite a lot of chaos and huge problems.
What is that chaos?
Well, in the sense that where companies have received payment, they've not. So what has happened is UIF has not fully paid out for all employees that are registered in those companies. And so you'll have a case, and I'll give you a very specific example, Air Chef, where workers, I think about only 300 out of 800, or 300 workers received the relief payment, and about 800 did not. And so when we, contact the employer points us back to UIF. UIF points us back to the employer. I mean, that's a completely unfair situation to place workers. Where does that leave workers?
Okay, let's just quickly then bring in the DG also listening into this conversation, the DG of the Department of Employment and Labour, DG Lamati, listening into what COSATU had to say and what NUMSA is now saying. They also raise another concern, the concern around TERS and how it is being abused, but also the concern around companies using this particular period to lay off on their workers.
Already, we share the same concerns with COSATU with regards to the opportunistic tendencies by some employers to use this period. And what they are trying to do is to avoid following the laid-down process, which is to consult with workers, and also give the CCMA an opportunity to assist in and also look at whether the retrenchments could be avoided. The second one, the issue that is raised by Upakamile is that there are three reasons why employees do not get funding or do not get the payout. One, we've picked up that there are some employers who, when we pay the money to them, they tell their employees that they will pay them after 25 days. So in the process, the money sits in the bank and accumulates interest.
Yeah.
So the second one is that companies have submitted a list to the UIF. Now, we're picking up that in instances where they have 10 employees that are declared, they would submit a list of 30. So you have 20 employees that are not declared. So when we pay out, what they do is that they spread the money to all of those workers, even though they know that they have not declared those workers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the third one is that our officials on a daily basis, even at night, they work with the employers to correct the information that they've submitted. I mean, you would be surprised that we can't pay employees because of a wrong bank account.
Mm-hmm.
So from our side, we send to the bank rejects it because the bank accounts are not correct. So we have to go back and talk to the employer and say, look, we have a problem here.
Yeah. Are there any sanctions for those companies that are leaving the money in the bank account so that they accumulate interest?
Look, because we've picked this thing up now, we're changing. Most likely, going to change our strategy for those employers. We're going to pay directly to the employees because anyway, our system has a facility for us to pay directly to the employees. So we were not paying directly because it was an option that employers chose. We gave them 3 options, and they chose for us to pay into their accounts, and then they will pay the employees. And now that we see that some of these things are happening, we will be in discussion with the employers to tell them that we'll be exercising our right to pay directly to the employees.
Okay. Mr. Njalinjali, I'm sure that some of your members are also impacted by this particular thing where companies are taking money from the UIF and retaining that money in their bank accounts to accumulate interest. Are you satisfied with the response from the DG?
We're engaging.
Hi, Mr. Njali, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost him there. Let's go to Pagamile Hlubi Majola. In the meantime, listening into what the DG had to say, are you satisfied with that particular answer?
It's difficult for me to say that I am, to be frank with you, Aldrin. I mean, how do you explain to a worker who's been without salary since the 26th of March that there's a system glitch or there's a failure of the employer? You see, the problem that we have, and NUMSA raised this very sharply right at the beginning when government spoke about the measures that were being rolled out for COVID-19, is that they've put all the power in the hands of employers. They should have never put all of that control around this process in the hands of employers. So when you listen to his explanation, he talks about how you've got employers who don't comply, employers who don't fill in proper details. everything is left up to the hands of the employers. What should have happened is that government should have given the directive to say guaranteed income for the period of the lockdown, as opposed to the situation now where workers are left in the lurch, and frankly, those explanations are just not good enough.
Okay, Mr. Njali is back, Begin Njali from COSATU. Are you satisfied with what the DG had to say around this issue of the TER system being abused?
I think there are a lot of challenges that we're experiencing on a daily basis. To an extent where we have asked the department to name and shame those employers who, for various reasons, they are not telling the truth to their members. Either they receive the money, they don't have pay it over on time, or they give wrong information, which we said, irrespective of whether a worker was contributing to the UIF or not, the worker still needed to be paid, and the department needed to follow up with the employer to do some criminal charges against the employers.
Yeah.
So this was not expected. I think they were initially overwhelmed, but gradually from the experiences that we are getting, the report we are getting on a daily basis, I think they are moving in the right direction, slowly, painful as it may be, but workers needed to be paid.
Okay, DG, just quickly, I know that you have to leave, but are you looking into pressing charges against these companies?
No, definitely. I mean, when we've picked up that there are, fraud cases, we will definitely press charges. We have to do a proper investigation, though. That's why we're bringing back a number of our inspectors that were working from home. So we bring them back so that they can handle these cases.
Okay. Thank you so much. That is the DG of Labour, that's Employment and Labour, DG Tobile Lamadi. Let's continue our conversation, and now looking at the lockdown, and many calling for lifting of the lockdown. Some saying, let's go to level 2. Others are saying we're ready for level 3. The Democratic Alliance is part of that debate as well. Mr. Njali, looking at the situation that we're facing at the moment, are you looking into it and saying that probably we can move over to level 3 or even level 2 for that matter?
I don't think there's evidence that suggests we should be moving to level 2 or level 3 at this particular point in time, because many of the employers have failed to do the prerequisite in terms of just opening the economy, even in the smallest scales. The directions or directive are quite clear that before you open it up, you need to meet some requirement. For an example, ensure that there's the social distances, the question of that the workplace itself must be sanitized and etc., and everybody must get all those things. The report that we're getting is that employers are not ready to do that. Okay. The Department of Labour, with their inspection, they are not able to supervise that one. So we're not ready to go to level 3 at this stage.
Okay. Mr. Njali, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but in a minute, just looking at the post-COVID-19 economy, what is it that you'd like to see? Because some may argue that we can't continue with the legislation that we currently have into a post-COVID-19 economy.
COSATU have already started to talk to a number of issues. Of course, the economy is the first prize that we need to do. The question of the financial injection to the economy, particularly to the infrastructure, and to create new jobs, decent jobs, inclusive economy, we need to do that one. But we have to go to some of the labor legislation. For an example, is a pittance that the legislation says when you are being retrenched, you must only get 1 week wages for each completed year of services. But we need to look to the social protection.
Okay.
There are millions and millions of people who are not covered.
Okay, Paramile Hlubi-Majola, unfortunately, your last take and a quick bite on this matter, imagining the post-COVID-19 economy. Hi, Paramile. Okay, we seem to have lost Paramile Hlubi-Majola there. And this is a discussion as well about the post-COVID-19 economy, because one thing that we should be sure about is that the legislation that we currently have in place, it took us at least 27 years since 1994 to get to a point where we can say that the 28th of February, 2020, that's how long it took us to get to that particular point. And how much longer will it take us to get back to where we were on the 28th of February 2020. These are real conversations and discussions to be had by our lawmakers, politicians, as well as you at home. Thank you so much for watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre. We're back again next week.